every F3 workout must end in a circle of trust. And essentially what that is it's just you come together. A lot of times you'll kind of lay a hand on a brother, getting that physical, intimate, touch situation, like you're there, right? And it's very raw. And you lay a hand on a man, and the guy might be a Christian, so maybe he prays. Or the guy you may have no faith really whatsoever, and he might just give kind of a word of shout out. But we share the burdens that we have, right? So I've heard everything in these circles from, I'm being tempted back to alcohol, to I cheated on my wife, to this actually just happened this week, to my to my little brother committed suicide. Either you lay it at the feet of your brothers here in this circle so that they can help you pick it up, or you're laying it at the feet of your Creator so that He can help you pick it up, right? And so it's a very open and a very honest thing that we do at the end here. So we got to this end of this workout right after my first time, and I survived. Praise, right? And got in that circle, and we laid hands on each other, and some guy prayed us out. And Kurt, I was like, I'm not really sure what just happened right there. And so it kind of, ruminated, right? It rattled around in my brain for a week or two. And I was like, I think I'll go back next week. I know I almost died, right? Or felt like I was going to, right? But I think I'm going to go back next week. So I went back the next week. And after, I don't remember if it was that time or maybe the next time, I went home and said to my wife, honey, I think I know what Elders Quorum is supposed to be like.
In this episode, we're talking with, at least I am talking with, the CEO of F3, Frank Schwartz. You're going to love Frank's personality, his energy, his passion for battling for the hearts of men across this nation and this world. I was first introduced to F3 by Benjamin Williams. Shout out to him for connecting me with Frank. But Benjamin came to the Warrior Heart men's retreat that I do down in Arizona, and I do it in a few other locations, which you should definitely come to. Go to awarriorheart.com, put the link in the description. But anyways, at this men's retreat, Benjamin asked me, like, hey, can I get up early and invite some guys to do F3? And I was like, what's F3? Like, oh, it's just a simple workout that we do together in the mornings with other men. And we focus on fitness, we focus on fellowship, and we focus on faith, F3. And I said, sure, I've never heard of this organization. And then Ben connected me to Frank, who's the CEO of a volunteer CEO of F3Nation.com. And really, obviously you'll understand it by the end of this episode, but this is a phenomenal tool for church leaders, especially elders quorum presidents, bishops, who are trying to engage the hearts of men in their ward or elders quorum. A simple, ongoing program that's a nonprofit organization that doesn't cost anything, that you can point men to, that can be transformational and help them find brotherhood or fellowship and get their bodies moving. The research is endless as far as the benefits of exercise, and then with a focus on faith and orienting ourselves to God, and that He is the answer to whatever problem we face in this world. So this model, this approach, you're going to love it. There's so much elders quorum presidents can learn from this. And so if you know of an elders quorum president, an elders quorum presidency member, or a man in your life who happens to be a Latter-day Saint, point them to this episode. Frank also is a Latter-day Saint. So, he speaks the jargon. He knows the dynamics that we face, and just the way he describes how F3 fits into our faith tradition is worth knowing. So here's my interview with Frank Schwartz, also known as Dark Helmet. You'll understand. All right, today, Frank, you're in the house. Frank Schwartz. Try
Indeed.
not to think about your last name too much, or I'll say it wrong. But welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Really appreciate it.
Nice. Now, you are a Latter-day Saint. You live in North Carolina, is that right?
Correct. Kind of just a little, well, I technically live in South Carolina, but
Okay.
I can throw a rock and hit North Carolina from here. But, taxes, schools. We live in a place called Fort Mill, which is just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Nice. And are you originally from there?
Actually, no, I'm originally from Virginia.
Okay.
So grew up, was born kind of in Northern Virginia, grew up down in Southwest Virginia. If you're a football fan at all, the Hokies, Virginia Tech, Blacksburg, all that area down there.
Sure.
And then, things are what they are. And I met a girl and moved to Utah for a few minutes, and then was told by my mother-in-law, you can never, ever take my grandbabies out of Utah. So I
Uh-oh.
quickly got out of Utah before I had the grandbabies, and then there we are. So we ended up
Nice.
in Charlotte area.
Nice. And then our main focus today is hopefully talk about F3,
Indeed,
which is I've gotten a little flavor of the organization and the mission and those things. I think there's a lot of parallels that fit into church leadership, especially related to elders quorum. But I
agreed.
mean, when people ask you about what you do with F3 or what it is, give us that pitch.
Sure. So my role in F3, let me disclaim this by saying uh, we have a lot of made up names and things and kind of our own little language and vernacular, and it's kind of its own little community, closed thing.
Uh-huh.
And so if I use a lot of weird lingo, just understand it's kind of like the church, right? There's a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
jargon, so anyway. My role, technically on paper, I'm the CEO, which, what does that mean? Who knows? Because we're a volunteer organization that it has free workouts, right? So we charge no money, and we run this whole thing. But the F3 term for my role is Nant'an, and Nant'an it's a throwback to an old Cherokee, an Apache, I think, word that basically means powerless leader. And the idea here
Nice.
is, I know it's funny, right? But I'm sort of just the cultural and spiritual head.
Uh-huh.
Now, obviously, it's an organization, so there's some administrative stuff that kind of goes along with that as well. But if you were to think of it sort of in church terms, um, you know, I have sort of a shared leadership team, much like a presidency would be. We sort of lead the men, and a lot of what we end up doing is. Again, it's so funny how parallel this ended up being to the church. Some of it before I got here, and then some of it, obviously, I'm like, well, you know what we should do, and so you kind of start structuring things. Because you're like, I know a very successful organization that we could model this after, right? But
Yeah.
it's a very decentralized organization, and so this idea of a powerless leader is a person who can only lead by influence. I have no institutional authority over men
Hmm.
anywhere. The different we call them regions, but you could call them chapters or whatever. They function largely independently, a huge amount of autonomy in those areas, and then there's just enough centralization to sort of keep the culture, similar and protected and that sort of thing across the entire F3 nation. But so yeah, that's sort of my
Yeah.
role is the I don't want to say figurehead because that sounds like I don't do a whole lot, but
Uh-huh.
it's close.
Yeah. So what is F3 and what does F3 stand for?
Absolutely. So if you go to f3nation.com, you can read a lot of things and watch a lot of videos and that sort of thing. The three F's are fitness, fellowship, and faith. And in our vernacular, fitness it starts with physical fitness. We're big believers that a man's body is something he has to take care of, right? And that's the first part of him developing discipline in his life and becoming more of what he ought to be as a husband and as a father and as a member of his community, right?
Yeah.
If you don't live a disciplined enough life to take care of yourself, it's very difficult for you to lead others. It's not impossible, but it's more difficult. And so we sort of start there. So that's fitness. And then fellowship, obviously that's pretty obvious what that is. Kurt, we were talking right before we kind of started. You sort of hit that early 40s, mid 30s, early 40s kind of time frame, and sometimes you look back and you go, well, the last time I remember having friends that weren't you know my daughter's friend's dad, right?
Yeah.
Or the soccer dad on a Saturday. Last time I really remember having close friends was maybe high school or maybe played some sports in college or something like that. And so you kind of have this 20-year gap and you start looking around and you're like, man, I don't really have guys that I'm close to. Now, for us, right, as members of the church, uh, we have an elders quorum. Sometimes it functions pretty well, and maybe you have some close friends and relationships in there. Maybe sometimes it's kind of just we all just sort of show up, and then boy, as soon as it's 12:01, baby, and I'm out of here, whatever, right? So some of
Yeah.
that, but then the faith we define as a belief in something bigger than yourself,
Hmm.
and so it's not a religious organization. We don't have any kind of particular faith tradition that we would subscribe to, or that we would even pretend to tell a guy that he should belong to. Um, Obviously, we started in the Southeast, so it's a predominantly Christian flavor to it. But really, our true belief is that for a man to be an effective leader and to be an effective husband, father, and all those kinds of things, he's got to believe in something bigger than himself.
Mhm.
He's got to submit himself to that. And he has to use the talents and abilities that he's been given to submit himself to that and then to serve the people in the communities around him. So that faith, again, is not a religion per se or a church or denomination of any kind. It's really just that belief that, hey, I'm not the center of the universe. I'm not the king of the world. And so by virtue of the fact that nothing revolves around me, my life has to be spent in the service of others.
Yeah. And how long has the organization been around?
So it started 1/1/11. So it's we just began year 14.
Cool.
I've been participating for just a little over 10 years myself. It was founded by a guy named Dave Redding and another guy named Tim Whitmire here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it started, it really just started as a workout. Just some guys getting together, working out outside. It was free. It actually splintered off another kind of small group of guys who were doing that already. So they were out there and they're working out outside. It was free. Some guy who was like a personal trainer was like, we shouldn't have to pay to go to the gym. Like we should work out outside and whatever. So they started doing it and they were like, this is amazing. So but the guy who was running it said, hey, I want to cap this. We're not going to grow this to any size. Like, there's only these 25 guys. I'm not, I can't manage any more than that. So I'm not doing it. And so Dave and Tim were like, well, would you be mad if we went over here and kind of started our own group of this? And honestly, day one, they thought, well, maybe nobody's going to show up, but we'll see. But it's New Year's. Who knows? Maybe we'll get lucky, right? Because guys are always kind of, into fitness after the New Year. And apparently somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 guys showed up that first week. And then week after that, it was the same thing. And then it kind of kept growing. And pretty soon they were like, we can't manage all this. And what Dave realized is, and this is sort of the bigger part of it, right, is what started as a workout accidentally became a leadership machine. Because through that, Dave found his personal purpose, which was to invigorate male community leadership. And because, when you look around, what he would see at his church, he's not a member of our faith, but what he would see at his church was a lot of guys standing in the corner with their hands in their pockets.
Yeah.
And he was like, why are men stepping up to do the things that I think that I'm reading in the Bible that we're supposed to do? Right. And so knowing that the workout was something that would bring men together and put them in community with one another, you started seeing guys start to think outside themselves because they had a lot of these other holes in their lives filled. And then the realization came that, the only hole left is the God hole, and no Lamborghini sized hole in your heart, man. It doesn't exist, right? So, pursuit of those things of the world became uninteresting, and pursuit of personal purpose and self-discipline and self-improvement and those kinds of things became kind of the fare of the day. And so, what started as a little, tiny little workout in Charlotte, North Carolina now has a worldwide movement of, we estimate somewhere between, 70, 80,000 guys.
That's cool. So how did you get introduced to it all?
So we have so going back to jargon, right? We have something we call an emotional headlock, right? You can't actually headlock a guy to come to a workout. That wouldn't be polite, right? so we emotionally headlock you. Essentially what that means is we guilt you, right? So I had a couple of buddies who were like, oh, you ought to come and that sort of thing. And truthfully, I had it was the winter of 2014, I think it was. And I just gone to the doctor, annual physical. And Kurt, I was about 50 plus pounds heavier than I am now. And
Wow.
He said, she goes, look, you got sleep apnea, you got high blood pressure, you got high cholesterol. You're basically a stroke waiting to happen.
Wow.
And so if you don't do something, I'm going to start putting you on a whole bunch of medicine, and that's just the way life's going to be. And I said, well, I don't want any of that. And I'd been hearing about this F3 thing, and I met a couple guys, and I'd heard, I had a buddy that I kind of, did some work with that he had lost a bunch of weight. And I was like, man, what are you doing? You look fantastic. And he was like, well, I started doing F3. And then he told me what they did. And I was like, well, that sounds stupid. There's no way I'm doing that. I mean, that sounds very intense. And it is, outside in the rain. What are you, nuts? Right? There's no way I'm doing that. And then one Saturday, it just had again, it's a lot like the church, right? Like these thoughts just kept ruminating, in your head over time. And then I was like, all right, fine, I'll go to the stupid thing. And I showed up on a Saturday morning, and it's an hour-long workout. And one of our core tenets is that it's peer led, right? There's no one, there are no, well, actually we have one employee as part of F3, everybody else, and I'm not it. And everybody else is a volunteer, right? So from me, the theoretical head of the organization, all the way down to the individual men who, participate in the workouts and lead the workouts, it's all volunteer. and it's done in a rotating fashion, right? So you serve for a period of time, and it's hold tight, right? You start going, wait a minute, this does sound
Yeah.
familiar, right? You serve for a certain period of time in a responsibility, and then you move on to the next thing, right? And every week, every workout, or every day at every workout, different guys leading. So I show up on a Saturday rather, and it's an hour long. There's a couple of guys that are leading that Saturday, and we get through about a half hour of the workout, and I didn't know what to expect, right? The guy pulls us all in. He's going to give us kind of a good word. And he's like, well, that was really great, guys. Good job. Worked hard, blah, 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 blah. All right. Now for the second half, I'm going to hand it off to and I was like, how is there a second half? I feel like I'm going to die. Right. But Kurt, we do something at the end of every workout that we call a circle of trust, right? That's our fifth core principle, is that every F3 workout must end in a circle of trust. And essentially what that is it's just, you come together. A lot of times you'll kind of lay a hand on a brother, getting that physical, intimate, touch situation, like you're there, right? And it's very raw, and you lay a hand on a man, and the guy might be a Christian, so maybe he prays, or the guy you may have no faith really whatsoever, and he might just give kind of a word of shout out. But we share the burdens that we have, right? So I've heard everything in these circles from, I'm being tempted back to alcohol, to I cheated on my wife, to this actually just happened this week, to my to my little brother committed suicide.
Wow.
And so you get in that circle with those men, and you lay hands on one another, and you pray, or you share it, right? And we say all the time, like, either you lay it at the feet of your brothers here in this circle so that they can help you pick it up, or you're laying it at the feet of your Creator so that He can help you pick it up. Right. And so it's a very open and a very honest thing that we do at the end here. So we got to this end of this workout right after my first time, and I survived. Praise. Right?
And to tell about it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And we got in that circle, and we laid hands on each other, and some guy prayed us out. And Kurt, I was like, I'm not really sure what just happened right there. And so it kind of, ruminated, right? It rattled around in my brain for a week or two. And I was like, I think I'll go back next week. I know I almost died, right? Or it felt like I was going to, right? But I think I'm going to go back next week. So I went back the next week. And after, I don't remember if it was that time or maybe the next time, I went home and said to my wife, honey, I think I know what elders quorum is supposed to be like.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So.
Wow. And so is the typical cadence like it's a weekly thing, or is it a daily thing in some areas, or just depends?
I'm out there every day, and part of it depends on how many guys are participating in the workout in your local geographic area. Again, don't be surprised, right? I sneakily, unsneakily, because I don't do anything sneakily, I just tell you right to your face, right? I'm like, well, guys, there's only a couple of organizations in the world that I know of that are decentralized, like we try to be in F3, that have run very successfully. One is the U.S. military. The other is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I just told them, I'm like, so guess what? We're structuring ourselves after that. Like, that's the pattern. And so, in these local areas, depending on how many guys are participating within the geographical region, right? They may have enough guys to support, multiple days a week. They may have, only enough guys to kind of support 1 or 2 days of working out a week, because you can't, count on everybody to be there every day. Where I am in Fort Mill, since it started in Charlotte, and kind of was an early plant down here, there's probably, I don't know, on any given day, there's 100 guys that are working out around our little town. There's 5 or 6 different locations that have workouts on every single day. In some parts of the country, it's even way bigger than that. There's parts of St. Louis, Texas, and other places where Birmingham, Alabama, hundreds and hundreds of men will work out across dozens and dozens of different locations in their area on any given day. So it happens. It happens as often as the men on the ground and the leaders of those areas, those Nant'ans, local Nant'ans, right, that they deem fit. The structure and the cadence of these things is really up to the men on the ground. So in a similar way, right? Like, Salt Lake says a thing, right? This is what you must do, or this is what we think you ought to do, or whatever, right? And then there's we're a little more structured, we're a little more centralized than F3 is, right?
Yeah, sure.
But it'll boil down, and you kind of go, well, the local bishop or local stake president has a lot of leeway to adapt this to whatever it is that he sees fit
Local
to do.
adaptation, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's huge, right? And it's,
Mhm.
again, most effective and efficient way to run an organization of this size, particularly when everybody's a volunteer, that I'm aware of. So as long as the mission is being followed, right, and the 5 core principles are intact, then you're good to go.
Love it. Love it. And so if somebody wants to find an F3 group, I assume they go to your website and you got a directory there to geographically search for a group maybe that's near them, or how to start one.
Yeah, 100, both, right? So I would say, I don't know, once or two, 3 times a month, something like that, we'll get one. And it's like, I'm here in, Paducah, and there's no F3 workout near me. And we're like, well, there's a reason for that, friend. Like
Yeah.
you're in the middle of nowhere, right? But we
Uh-huh.
have resources that we kind of help that guy and support him to kind of get started and moving down the road. And then really, if you went to f3nation.com, and I can't remember what the tab says, but essentially it's, locations or find a workout or something like that. And you
Mhm.
can click there and there's a big map, and you can plug in and say, okay, I live here, and zoom in, and you can find all the workouts that meet. It'll tell you the days of the week. It'll tell you what time of the morning, what kind of workout it is. Hey, this is a run only, or this is, we work out with kettlebells, or, whatever it might be.
Okay, so depending on the group, if a guy's got a set of kettlebells or dumbbells or whatever, they may bring some equipment, but generally you just use the outdoors and run
Yeah,
and
generally speaking, and it really was designed to be to remove all barriers to entry.
Mhm.
Uh, our 5 core principles are that, number one, it's free,
Mhm.
always and forever. You will never, ever, ever pay to attend an F3 workout. It is truly no charge whatsoever, because there shouldn't be a barrier there, right?
Mhm.
Because we believe so strongly in what we're trying to do that we wouldn't want to put up something that it's like, we have to be able to afford to come. So no barrier there. The second core principle is that it's open to all men, and we mean all. Like, we're not joking, right?
Yeah.
So, and I kind of always say, hey, black and white, bond and free, right? And
Yep.
candidly, there are F3 workouts that guys have started because it's on their heart to do so, in prisons, right? They have
Wow.
gone and started these things to try and help these men find purpose again in their lives, and rehabilitate them. And then the third is that it's outdoors no matter what. The fourth is that it's peer led in a rotating fashion. And the fifth is that there's a circle of trust. And so, yeah, the idea, the design was that, yeah, you wouldn't have to have any equipment. You wouldn't have to have anything. So it's very boot camp style, a lot of body weight. You kind of will get to know the terrain after a while. And you're like, oh, yeah, I remember there's a pile of rocks over here. And so we'll go pick up heavy rocks and carry them. I mean, it's very, yeah, well, a
Yeah.
lot of times we call it grown man recess, Kurt. Like, it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
In God's gymnasium that you
Exactly.
created,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Right.
No, that's awesome. That's really cool. Well, and you sent me some great principles here and as we go through this, I'd love for you to just, find as many of those parallels or principles that especially elders quorum presidents, or even, young men's leaders. I'm sure
Sure.
there's a lot of principles here for them as well.
Absolutely.
And I'm currently serving as an elders quorum president. And so I'm thinking,
Oh, lucky
man,
you.
if we find a local F3 group and just say, and just make it aware,
Yeah.
make the quorum aware of it. And that could be one more place of fellowship that we can
100%.
extend from our elders quorum and vice
100%.
versa, right?
And there is so you're in American Fork, right? Isn't that what you said?
Yeah.
Or
Mhm.
somewhere? Yeah. 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 Right down the street from my in-laws. They're over in Alpine. But so there's a group, at least one that I'm aware, a couple of groups, I think, that are kind of up in like South Jordan,
Uh-huh.
Daybreak and all that kind of area up there. I mean, super good guys. A lot of them not members of the church. In fact, probably
Yeah.
most are not
Yeah.
members of the church. There's a handful of guys that are members. You know how we are, Kurt. We tend to kind of be like, well, I already belong to a cult. I can't belong to 2 cults, right? Just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm
I
kidding.
know.
Right? But I tell everybody it's okay. 2's the limit. If you go to 3, you got a real problem. But
That's
two,
right.
you're good to
That's
go.
right.
But
Yeah.
we tend to be a little insular and a little wary of any group outside
Yeah.
of us. We don't.
Or why do I need to gather with a group of men when I already do it, right?
Right. Exactly. I
Yeah.
have something here. Well, it's not necessarily the same, but yeah, that essentially that's exactly what we would hope would happen, right? As a guy would go, that sounds like something I need. That
Yeah.
sounds like something I might want to do, and then go find a group and join it.
That's cool. Yeah, I just think that, I just think of things like Just Serve, which obviously is a
Mm-hmm.
church-led, program, but it's also that you're not going to find the church's logo all over it, or it's not, it's meant for the community,
Yeah,
right? And
100%.
so this is another angle where, especially in Utah or along the Wasatch Front, Arizona, Idaho, where I always say if there's an opportunity for you to do some interfaith something, like jump at it,
Right.
right? Like whether that's at the food bank or, F3 or whatever it is.
Absolutely. And Kurt, I would tell you, guys sometimes I think get caught up and it's like, well, if I go out there, to these other places where other people are, then I have to be a missionary.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
I have to share the gospel. And, the 70s ruined us, right? We got very concerned about the fact that, well, I was on a plane. I guess I have to try and convert the guy next to me. Like can't just have a normal conversation. And the
Yeah.
way it was always kind of portrayed and, characterized in conference and stuff would be like, well, I spoke to the man next to me and then he fell out of the plane into a font and he's a member of the church today. And you're like, man, why doesn't this
Yeah.
happen to me? I don't understand. And so I think sometimes we get a little too caught up. And so it makes us a little wary again, or a little afraid or hesitant, whatever, to go out into the community and just go be a light, man. Like I will tell you this, the fitness is great. It's wonderful. And it's changed my life in a lot of ways, obviously health-wise. There's so many things that I've learned about personal discipline, about pushing through limits and things like that has been really, really wonderful, right? But I'll tell you, I am 10 times the Latter-day Saint that I was. And I was like you, I go to Elders Quorum. I was an Elders Quorum president. I've been bishoprics. I've done the whole deal, right? And young men's and all that kind of stuff, right? But I live my faith infinitely better, partially because of the things that I learn, but mostly because of the men that I associate with.
Yeah.
And their faith and their dedication to what they're doing is very instructive for one, right? Inspiring for two. And it just, it's really fantastic. It is really, really fantastic. So
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump into some of these principles
Sure.
here. You've first put management and leadership aren't from the same
That's right.
planet.
I
Tell me
forgot.
more.
Yeah. I forgot that, that she asked, that was a little while ago. She asked like, what are your top 5? I don't know.
Yeah.
I just made stuff up.
Okay. We can
So,
go there.
this
We
is
don't
good.
have
No,
to.
let's do it. Let's do it. So, management and leadership are not from the same planet. I would say that's one of the big lessons that I feel like I've learned from F3. And, we have a tendency, especially in our world and really in the church, we tend to defer to authority. And it's typically institutional authority, right? So if a person holds a certain position, we think, oh, well, they must be right. Like Kurt, he's the Elders Quorum president.
Mm-hmm.
Like, never mind that Kurt's an idiot, right? Whatever, right? Right? You're not,
Right.
You know what I mean, right?
Yeah,
And,
sure.
or he's the bishop. Like, oh, well, he's the bishop. I guess that's just the way it is. And that's fine. There's some value to that sometimes, right? Especially if it's in relation to priesthood keys and things along those lines, right? There is some need to defer and to have some procedure around that. And I would say, maybe the bishop every once in a while, or maybe the Elders Quorum president every once in a while looks at you and says, thus saith the Lord, and gives you some advice. I haven't had that experience. I've certainly never done that anyway, right?
Yeah.
So there's management, which is sort of an administrative function. And I know from serving in certain callings, and I know you hear it from a lot of guys who serve in certain callings, right? That it is a very administrative and less ministrative kind of an endeavor. It's just a lot of stuff you got to do, especially like bishoprics. Like, man, you're managing a program, but you're not necessarily leading.
Yeah.
Right. There's a big difference, and the difference I think becomes because management is largely about control and about making sure that things hit certain milestones or in certain procedure, or they follow a certain pattern, or whatever it might be, right? But then you are really in the details, and you're trying to make sure that things are controlled and that things are a little more programmatic and rigid, if you will, and that kind of a thing. And that tends to be management. And that's true in the workplace. You can tell a manager from a leader, right? There's plenty of managers out there. We create them every day. A lot of people have no business being managers, but they're made managers because somebody's got to do it, right? Or maybe they're really good at keeping track of the details or whatever it is. A leader, on the other hand, is somebody who can see a place of advantage, right? And has the vision to know this is where we should be. And then they exercise what I consider to be the skills of leadership, right? They have that vision and they articulate that vision clearly to those people that they want to help. A manager wants to move someone along to a place because that's where they're supposed to be, and they have to be there at a certain time, and you need to follow this route to get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
A leader says, I'm not necessarily even sure how we're going to get there, but I know where we should be. And I will articulate that clearly to you. And then I will attempt to persuade you to come along with me. Right. And then when the obstacles come, I will encourage you and exhort you and love you to come through those obstacles. And that's leadership. Now, leadership does not require any kind of position, does not require any kind of bestowal of authority. Right. If you ask a guy, and he'll be real honest about it, right? In F3, and you go, do you follow, do you follow what Frank says? And, we all get idiot nicknames too. That's part of the kind of the tribalism of our deal, right?
Yeah.
So my idiot nickname is Dark Helmet because, they were like, oh, your last name is Schwartz. And then they went right to Spaceballs and they're like, what was the bad guy's name in Spaceballs? Oh, yeah, that's your name, right? So if you asked a guy in F3 and said, oh, do you follow what Dark Helmet says? Some of them would probably go, well, first, some of them probably go, who's that? I don't even know who that is, right? So that's one thing, right? Which is fine. That's great. That means that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They know who their local guy is. They don't even know who I am. It doesn't really matter, on a real day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah.
So, but some would go, we follow kind of the core principles and, what's going on. But then there'll be some, right? And particularly those that are in proximity who'd be more than happy to say, oh, yeah, I absolutely would follow that guy. And I say the same about a lot of those guys. They don't have authority over me. I can't go and revoke, St. Louis's charter, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
There is no such thing, right? I can't say, oh, the use of the logo is no longer approved for you, right? I don't have any authority to do that. But as a leader, I'm supposed to inspire a man, right? And help him to understand that those core principles are something that are valuable. So I'm going to help you hold the standard, brother. I'm going to help you to live by those things. So that's kind of the difference, right? One is like, I have the authority and you'll do what I say. The other is kind of much more persuasion. Oh, hold on. You're ready with the gentleness, kindness, meekness, love unfeigned. Sound familiar, right?
Right. Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah.
So along those lines, like, the thing that another angle of F3 that intrigues me is it really is like you mentioned, sort of this lay leadership led type of organization. Is there like, how does that work? Because on paper, lay leadership shouldn't work, right? There should be a tyrant that comes to the surface and takes over and leads in a different direction. But I'm sure there's stories where things kind of go, off the wheels a little bit, and for people maybe try to turn it into something that it's not. Or how does that all work?
What's interesting? So yes, and we have terms for those guys. Probably nothing I could say here, but no, I'm just kidding. It's not that bad, but certainly there are guys who think they should have been in charge, right? That they should be the ones running the thing.
And I know how to do a squat. Let me
exactly.
You don't, or
right. And you know who those guys are? Those are managers.
Yeah.
It becomes very obvious when you sit in, and you can say this is true of in a congregation of the church as well, right? It becomes very obvious when a person is there to try and get a thing done so that they can show what a good leader they are, right? And I would never say a name, and it's not anyone that anyone would know, and I would never say that it was in our current ward or a ward in the past or whatever. But in a similar fashion, the guy who is serving the elders quorum presidency, and he got 100% on his checklist of ministering interviews, with the people that are on his list, right? Well, when you find out later, it's like, well, he called enough the message for all those guys. He never talked to any of them, right? Right?
Yeah.
He's managing, and like when the people look and they're like, oh, look at those statistics, no, he's killing it out there, that guy, right? That's somebody trying to manage a program versus a guy who's trying to lead with love. And to persuade and to drag them along. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that's great. And because like there's typically like a leader or like somebody who starts the group, the F3 group, right? Sure. And so they kind of just naturally take charge. But we've
had a lot of failures too.
Yeah,
guys who thought they were the guy, and they get out there and nobody wants to follow them. Yeah, that's the beauty of it, right? Because it's very similar in the church, right? Now the church is different a little bit because it's like, well, even if I don't really like this guy, who's doing this thing, like I believe in the gospel, right? I can defer and go, well, I know the Book of Mormon is true. I know that the church is trying to, so this guy is a little less important and whatever. I'm still going to go to church because I follow Christ, right? Not because I follow this guy. Out here in the wild west of F3, like
Yeah.
if a guy hates what you're doing, he can walk across the street, start his own,
Yeah.
you know? And as national leadership, we would go, well, what was he doing wrong? What didn't you like? And he might explain it or whatever. And we go, makes sense to me. Go start it.
Yeah.
Free to
Yeah.
lead. There's a book, that Dave wrote called Free to Lead. Right. And that's exactly what you are. So there's a
Yeah.
little more Wild West in there, but yeah, this idea of lay leadership, because you're right, it should not work. It does not make any sense. Right.
Yeah.
But when you start going, well, it's successful because it's the truth.
Mhm.
Right. And the truth is that God placed a purpose in every man. Right. The truth is that God put our agency within us, and he gave us the light of Christ. And for members of the church, he gave us the gift of the Holy Ghost. And there's all kinds of tools that we have at our disposal to discern and to know what we ought to be doing. Right. And so it becomes pretty obvious, like I said, pretty quick, if a guy's there for himself or if he's there for the people. And if he's there
Mhm.
for the people, they'll follow him. Even if he's not a very good, well-spoken guy, he may not be the most charismatic. He may not be, you know what I mean? Like, you look at on paper, there's a plenty of guys who lead in F3 that you're like, him? Okay. If you say so. But
Mhm.
man, when you get in the trench with that guy and he is fighting on your behalf, he's encouraging you and loving you, like real deep masculine love for each other. It's transformative.
Yeah.
And you will follow that guy for sure.
Yeah. Is there like if someone finds, wants to do the F3 in their area, maybe they don't find one, or the groups they go to, they just don't jive well with them,
Sure.
and they want to start their own. What's some typical guidance? I mean, obviously follow the principles, the 5 principles you discussed, but is there any other advice you give to somebody as they're sort of starting off in that leadership role?
Sure. I mean, I could give a guy a lot of advice, right?
Uh-huh.
Because I've seen a lot of things that work and don't work. And somewhat you want to try and help a guy not make all the same mistakes. But then you start to realize that the mistakes are instructive,
Hmm.
right? Some of those mistakes you have to make. So I'm not going to tell you all the things, right? Because
Yeah.
you need to fail in certain ways so that you learn certain lessons in certain ways so that you can be a better leader. So if you were that guy though, for us now, it's so funny because we have a website and it's just called Stuff Worth Trying. We don't tell anybody what to do. There's a lot of stuff that's worth trying. So stuffworthtrying.com, and you can go find a lot of information about F3 and how to run an F3 chapter. But if you wanted to start one, or you were thinking to yourself, I don't really want to do it this way or that way or whatever, you could consult local guys that are near you, to
Yeah.
help, or you fill out the form on the website, and we've got guys, volunteers, who are more than happy to contact you, and that are kind of in charge of expansion across the U.S. And not surprisingly, we've divvied it up by geography, right? Don't get excited,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the guy that's over your geographical area contact you and talk to you about what it would take to start it.
That's cool. Yeah, and just just the light network of men who've been there, done that, and I love the idea of stuff worth trying. And essentially, that's what we're trying to do with leading saints. Of saying, we're not trying to say
Yes,
here are the 10, creeds of good leadership, and you must follow these, or you're a terrible leader. But it's just like, why don't you come share what you're doing? This other guy will come share what he's doing. This relief study president's going to share this, and
yeah.
maybe pick up some pieces and take it back to your role and see what works. So
It's part of
that's
what's
powerful.
successful about leading saints, and it's also part of what I mean, personally, what I love, right?
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know why I'm wired this way, Kurt. I really don't. But from the time I was little, if you want to guarantee that I would do a thing, just tell me to do the opposite.
Oh yeah,
You know,
the contrarian,
yeah,
right?
like it's just baked in there somehow. I don't know why. I've tried to, tamp that down so that I can be a good follower in the church and that kind of thing, right? Um, but uh, but yeah. So, and I think there's an element of that that's in every man. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's instructive. It's helpful.
And what do you I mean, what about the guy who has no fitness background, right? And he's just like, well, I guess we'll do jumping jacks for 30 minutes, or I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
is there more there?
So again, open to all men, no
Uh-huh.
matter how out of shape you think you are. Although I do love the one they're like, well, before I go out with you crazy guys, I must have to get in shape first. I'm gonna have to. We're like, you get well before you're the doctor too. Like, is that how you live your life? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, well, whatever, right? But yeah, so you wouldn't be asked to lead probably right away. We'd want you to get to a point where you felt comfortable to do that. And one of the things that we do at a national level is we do a lot of training and a lot of teaching. In fact, I tell the guys that are kind of leading the different areas of the country and stuff. We just had a call with them last week, or no, I guess it was beginning of this week. But anyway, and I said, understand that your role is not to be a manager. It is not to make sure and to start up a phone call with all the local guys and be like, okay, who's got problems? Like let me, whatever. Let's hear your complaints or whatever. We're not a complaint department. Because I'm not really interested in what they're complaining about.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in is how deep is this mission in their heart? And so your job is to teach and to guide and to train and to love a guy, to help him to understand that he needs to submit himself to the mission, right? And to give himself to a purpose, and then he'll find his way. So
that's really helpful. And then, the fellowship, I imagine, just kind of comes naturally. You just get guys together and somebody's going to tell a joke or talk about a movie they saw, and that sort of gets the ball rolling. But what about the last part, as far as the authenticity of it, circling up, I forget the words you use.
Yeah. The circle of trust at the end.
Yeah. Circle of trust. I mean, because that could be something you could just blow by, like, all right, anybody have any problems? Okay, good. All right, we'll see you next week or whatever. Like it's hard to lean into at times. Anything that you've learned there?
Yeah. And some do. So again, just like anything, the success or the failure of any endeavor, and certainly any organization, rises and falls on the leadership of it.
Yeah.
So if you want guys to do those things and to be open and to be, I don't particularly care for the term, but we know what I mean when I say it, to be vulnerable, right, and that kind of thing, then you should probably exhibit that yourself. You go first, you show them what it's supposed to look like, you demonstrate the behavior you wish to get, and when you see it, even in a small amount, you reinforce it, right? You tell them thank you. You say good job, all that kind of stuff, right? So you're constantly always teaching and training a man toward that advantageous place that he ought to be, right? He should be able to share with his brothers, what's on his heart. So when he does that a little bit, make sure you reinforce that behavior.
Yeah. And those principles are just really powerful. Like even going to the open to everyone. Now, if someone was to ask any elders quorum member or presidency, hey, is your elders quorum open to anyone? And they'd be like, oh yeah, of course. Like, literally anybody could walk in here. However, I think culturally these things creep up on us, right? As far as like if somebody walked in there and they're like, oh no, like everybody's in a white shirt and tie, like,
right.
I guess this isn't open to, it's like subconsciously that's sometimes where they go. Right. And so it's almost it's a proactive thing, right?
100%.
I'm sure there's guys that think, oh, I could never show up there because I am so overweight that I just don't fit in there. Right.
Sense. Yeah.
Well, any like thoughts, like how do you really make it open to anyone other than just saying that?
Yeah. So one thing is get over yourself.
Yeah.
That's number one, right? if you think you hold the key to what a guy ought to look like or do or be to join your group, then you got a problem. And I encourage you to look in the mirror and yell at that guy that's looking back at you and tell him what a jerk he is. And I mean that. I don't have a lot of tolerance or patience for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I would say it this way, Kurt. There's a big difference between an open door policy and a go out your door policy.
Yeah.
So a guy can say, oh, I've got an open door policy, and his door may be open, but he's putting all the pressure and all the onus on you to do something, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're a guy who's not really sure how he feels about life, you ain't gonna walk through any door. You're gonna sit at your desk and you're kind of try and pretend you don't exist. Yeah. That's what you're gonna do. But if you have a go through the door policy, and that's what we have in F3, leave the 90 and 9. That is an absolute, we would never probably say it that way because it may not make sense to guys who aren't, kind of tuned into what the Bible says, right? But that's 100% the way we look at it. You are, and there's some real wackos out there in F3. I will say it's a big tent. We attract them all, right?
Yeah.
But they'll chase guys down. They'll see a guy running across the park from them, and they will chase that guy down and be like, hey man, you should come work out with us. Instead of doing what you're doing, right? And they don't care. They don't care how big you are. They don't care what color you are. That's one of the great equalizers, right? When you go to an F3 workout, you're dressed in workout gear. It's tough to tell, Old Navy or, Walmart workout gear from, Dick's Sporting Goods workout gear. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's all workout gear. And for us, you put that logo on your chest, our brand is pretty strong, and we love to wear black. That's just sort of how it kind of, is very masculine of us, I guess. Big white, F3 logo on your chest, and everybody's wearing it. If you were to go up into Charlotte, in the metro area up there in Charlotte, you could work out next to guys who, and there's a workout that meets there every Saturday, and some of them go to other places too. But you could work out next to guys who are in a treatment facility. Okay. Recovering drug addicts, alcoholics, chronic homelessness, that sort of thing. And that'd be on your left, and on your right, there's a guy who very legitimately is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, because, all the big banks are here, and there's plenty of very, very, very wealthy men here in Charlotte, and we all work out together, and no one knows, and no one says anything, and no one cares.
Right.
The qualification, we all, guys joke, and they even ask some of the, like the transgender question or some of those kinds of things, right? I mean, there's all kinds of questions that pop up from time to time around this. And I say, look, the answer for you, no matter who walks up, right? Whether he looks like he might be homeless, whether he looks like he, might be rich, poor, it doesn't matter. Whether you're a black guy, white guy, purple guy, I don't care, right? Although, to be fair, if he's a purple guy, probably some questions that I want to ask, but right? But
yeah.
The question is, are you a dude? If he says yes, then you go, okay, well, are you willing to do burpees? If he says yes, then just proceed with the workout.
Yeah.
Right. Past that, it does not matter. And I've worked out with all of them. I've worked out with all of them. And it's the most equalizing thing in the whole world.
Yeah. And that's a big part, the answer, the question I asked, like that fellowship part's that's crucial. It's a proactive effort, right? Where we're not just focused on who's showing up, but like, hey, there's somebody else. We know that guy here at, every time that we show up at this park, let's reach out to him.
And we've gotten plenty of guys to join us that way. Right.
Yeah.
Because it really is a go out the door policy rather than an open door policy.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of maybe some questions that might come up is like, but come on, can I just bring my wife? Like, can't we just make this a couples thing? Wouldn't that be awesome? Like, we could do it a couples thing.
It comes up more often than you would like to know. Right. It comes up
because that's generally like in an elders quorum setting. That's where a lot of elders quorum activities goes. Like, well, can't we bring our wives? Like, that'll be so great to connect as couples. And on the paper, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Kurt, I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings when I say this. I can feel it already. That is you as a man hiding behind your responsibility to be a man. You want your wife. You want to offload the responsibility that you have to be in community and to love other men onto your wife. That's what you want to do. And if you don't, I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings. But that's the truth. You're shirking when you do that, because going and being in community with men and being open and honest and a little bit, again, vulnerable, if you will, to share what's on your heart and to be in an uncomfortable situation. Like, you've done this your whole life, guy. I get it. You've always let your wife be the party planner. She tells you what your social schedule is. Heck, half of them dress you guys. Like, enough, brethren, enough. I don't know whether it's just a societal thing. I don't like blaming the church for things, because I don't think the church did anything. The people in the church do stuff, you know what I mean? Like, right?
Yeah.
But there is kind of an overarching feeling of, I think it is societal. I think it's cultural too, and it's largely Western. But it's like, well, let's see. The school can raise my kid, right? The church can take care of my, spiritual, and they'll tell me what to do there. And my wife will tell me what chores I need to do. Heaven forbid I look around and figure it out on my own, right? She'll tell me what chores to do. She'll tell me what to wear. And so we've created a society where men continue to outsource their personal and individual responsibility to be leaders. They have given it away. And there's very few things in this world that frustrate me more than that. Kurt, it's going to sound a little crazy and whatever, and I get that. But again, two cults, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But I believe that that's my mission on earth, is to inspire men to overcome those self-limiting beliefs, to have them to understand you were created for more, and enough is enough, and it's time. In fact, it's past time for you to stand up and to lead in those places you were called.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Adam hid, and a lot of men are still hiding. Right. And it's not like,
very true.
The way that,
and then what do they do? The first thing is they go, well, she gave it to me.
right.
Come on, man. Right?
Yeah. Well, and the ways that men hide are so subtle, right? It's like,
Yeah.
well, no, I want to be a good husband, and so I want to include my wife, or I need to be home with my family, or
Right.
these
I
things.
can't
When
do quorum activity and develop a relationship with men because what my I need to sit home and play on my phone while my wife does things in the house. Like, shut up. Sorry. It's not acceptable.
yeah,
We cannot continue to live like this. Because I'm going to tell you this too, and this is crazy belief number 7, right? That I've probably espoused here, whatever. But um, President Nelson was pretty clear about the timing of things, right, and the hastening of the work.
yeah,
And I'm going to tell you, gathering Israel, and I believe this to my core. When he said this, I mean, Kurt, the heavens may as well have parted and spoke to me directly.
yeah,
Moses may as well have come down and said, "Remember that whole gathering of Israel thing? I'm talking to you, Frank."
yeah,
The gathering of Israel is 100%, without any question in my mind, the most important work that's happening on the earth today. And if you're sitting in your house playing on your phone while your wife does all the work for you, you are in direct opposition. You're in direct opposition, and you've got to get yourself together. And I can tell you right now, the tool that I use, Elders Quorum, sure, best I can, right? And I don't mean it to sound negative. I love my guys in my Elders Quorum, right? But there's not a ton of hard chargers in there.
hmm,
The guys that I associate with are the ones that are, and they are out there doing the work. They are out there doing the work physically, mentally, emotionally. And those are the guys that I'm like, this is the tool that I use to help me to be a better saint, right? To help
yeah,
me to be a better husband and a better father.
yeah. And in our structured church, as we've alluded to a little bit, I mean, it's cool. I mean, elders quorum. I love the concept of elders quorum, and I get that many times it doesn't hit the mark that maybe some men have with
Sure.
expectation of what it should be or what it could be. And I get that, and that's tough. But sometimes we kind of fold our arms, sit in the back elders quorum thing. Well, I guess, this is it.
Nothing's ever going to get any better here.
Yeah. I can't go home because my wife has the minivan keys, and I guess I'll
Or,
just get through this. Right. But
yeah, or the guys that
to
go sit in the foyer.
that's right.
Oh my gosh,
But
drive me nuts.
to put yourself in the driver's seat and saying like, yeah, my elders quorum could be better. And I know my elders quorum presidency's trying, or
Yeah.
yeah, I could give them a list of 10 things they could do better. But that doesn't mean you can't go out and find masculine fellowship elsewhere. I mean, there's so many opportunities. And that's why I want to highlight F3 as one of
Yeah.
those many things that if it's not down the street, then make yours the one that's down the street.
We will guide you every step of the way, man. I promise.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. And we have a phrase that we use a lot in F3, and of course, some guys who the ones who know, right? But I talk all the time about being an act or being an act upon, right? And
Yeah.
encouraging guys not to be an act upon, right? And I tell them
Uh-huh.
that, and they're like, "That's really good stuff." And I'm like, "Well, it's scriptural." I don't tell them where, right?
Yeah.
Right? But this idea, a phrase that we use a lot in F3 though, is if you're sitting back and you're saying to yourself, somebody ought to do something about this. Well, brother, you're that somebody.
Yeah.
And we'll hashtag it, like on Twitter or other places, right? Like being that somebody is exactly what we want you to do as a man. We want you to always be that somebody. You're the guy who looked and you found a need, or you observed a need in the community, in your home, in your church, or wherever it might be. And you say, you know what? It's not anybody else's responsibility. It's
Mhm.
my responsibility. I have to step up. If I'm going to become what God wants me to become, it ain't going to be because I tripped and fell into it. But I think that we think that it is because we treat it like that a lot.
Yeah. Amen, brother. Maybe just tell us before we wrap up here, like, what are you understanding about the masculine psyche? I mean, because that's the thing. We kind of get in this place of being like, I remember being the bishop, just sort of being like, man, like, what's the problem with these guys? They just got to stop looking at the porn, or like it's so easy. You just don't look, or why can't you get a job? Like, why are you? What's with the video games, right? We sort
Yeah.
of go to these places of just like despair, like just stop it, like just change, just be different. But how could you educate us just on the psyche of the masculine heart?
You'll hear it in a million different places, and we say all the time in F3, there's nothing that we're teaching or doing that is revolutionary, right?
Mhm.
This is all timeless principles that are just applied in a slightly different way, right? So you'll hear you've heard it 100 times before, but I'll say it and maybe it'll resonate a little different this time. But I think that it's important to recognize that men were, well, first of all, you got to accept who you are and quit trying to pretend like you're something you're not.
Mm-hmm.
You're not, uh, Andrew Tate or any of these other just wastes of space. I mean, these poor guys, just as lost can be. You're not those people. That's not you. Quit trying to pretend like it is. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not some kind of media mogul or some kind of internet influencer. Like you're none of those things. You got to admit what you are, and what you are is a child of God. You're a son who has a divine calling, and you've got to live that out. Now that means accepting the fact that sometimes it's tough, right? You talk about pornography or video games or whatever it might be, right? If a man is not willing to accept his purpose and he's trying to hide, I mean, those things are fig leaves. That's what
Mm-hmm.
they are. Those are fig leaves. And so he's just trying to hide from the fact that he doesn't accept and love who he is. There was a scripture, and so I'll just share this. You know what? Well, if this gets a little weird, you can cut it, Kurt.
Okay.
But, right? But I believed for a short period of time there, a few years back, I'd gotten to a point. Let me ask you this: do you know what Lou Gehrig died of?
ALS, right?
Yeah. And what do they call it?
Lou Gehrig's disease.
How do you see that coming?
Yeah.
Right? Right. So you
Right.
can't. Right?
What are the chances?
Yeah. Right. You're like, oh, they named the disease after me. I guess I was number one. Right.
Yeah.
I had honestly gotten to a point where I believed that maybe I was the first guy that God was just like, oh, all right. You know what? We tried. It's not that I don't love you. You're just too stupid. You just can't get it.
Yeah, we've all been there, especially as men. Yeah.
Fair, right? But I really thought, am I the first one? Because I could accept the idea that it was okay for other guys to be loved and guided and whatever by God, but it was just kind of like, it's not that I don't love you. It's just that you just wear me out. So I'm just going to kind of be disinterested in what's happening to you. And I think a lot of guys do feel that way.
Yeah.
Or something similar, right? And so in this race that we've created in our society to become something, right? We want significance. We talk about the male psyche. We want significance. We want to matter. We want to be important, not in the way that the world teaches, where it's like, oh, you're the CEO of a thing, or you're an influencer, or you're this, or you're that, or all these things I was kind of listing before. Like that's not how. That's what the world would want you to believe is the way to be important or to matter. The real thing I think a man wants is he wants to be able to look in the mirror and look at his family or whoever he is associated with, right? And he wants to know that no matter where he is, he knows exactly what he's supposed to do next, and that it has impact, that it matters what he does. And that ultimately, whether you can articulate it this way or not, ultimately that he leaves a mark on the world. He wants to leave a legacy. That's what he wants. He wants to matter in a way that is much larger than just what he's doing right now in front of him. And so unfortunately what happens, you don't get enough attaboys at home or enough attaboys at church or out wherever. And so you outsource the attaboys to your work.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys that are workaholics and they're chasing and they're like, well, that's not quite doing it. I know what I'll do next. I will purchase many things, Kurt. And if I can purchase enough things and I cram them in this hole in my heart, then that'll work. And it won't work. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
So in my belief, right, that I was this one guy who God had given up on, and I was chasing these things and I was trying my best to live that life and just to find meaning. What is the meaning? What is the purpose? And I knew, bring to pass your mortality and eternal life, man. I knew, I know the global purpose that we all share. But what's my role? What was my purpose? What am I for? Right? That's a tough question. That's a soul-wrenching question. And ultimately, to some degree, it came back to the Sermon on the Mount. And I had to admit to myself and go, okay, God said, don't worry about what you're going to eat, because he feeds the birds.
Mm.
They don't plant seeds in the ground. They don't harvest anything, stick it in a barn. None of that happens. But look at them. They eat. And then you go, well, maybe I'm not as good as birds. Okay, fine, smarty. You're not as good as birds? Fine. How about this? Are you better than grass? Consider the lilies. Don't worry about what you're going to wear. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Worry about our relationship. And when you really dive in and go, okay, Heavenly Father, I submit. I give in. You win. Right? Not that he's looking to win, but you know what I mean? Like, you win. And if you'll admit that, that's what the male psyche wants. They
Yeah.
want to have, and look, this is why so many guys have so many damaged relationships with their dads. And I tell them all the time, look, I guess it's your dad's fault, but now it's your responsibility.
Yeah.
They want to know that they're loved so that they can turn around and live the same way, right? They want to matter. They want to leave a legacy. They want to be significant in the lives of other people, not in an arrogant or worldly way. Like, look, Kurt, at some point, I'm going to stop doing this Nant'an thing, right? If I travel around right now and it's very flattering and I try to live by the James E. Faust, he told Elder Ruchtdorf, he said, they're going to say nice things about you, Dieter, but don't you ever inhale it.
That's right.
Right. Right. Try to live by that. Right. So I could travel all over and they'll say nice things and it's all wonderful. Again, tens of thousands of men that do this across the country. Many of them, are aware of whatever, like this person, right? In a few years, when I stop doing this, they're not going to remember a thing. They don't remember who I am. They're going to move on to the next guy. Right. And that's the beauty of it to some degree. But my hope is that the things that I taught them, the things that we talked about, the things that, and the way that I led, right? And it's always very satisfying. And maybe this is weird, but it's always very satisfying to me to hear a man talk about a thing as though he came up with the idea, right? And that this occurred to him. And I'm like, yes, well, that's really good. Even though knowing like 5 minutes before that's, something that we said, right? But you go, all I did was teach you the truth. Right? All I did was teach you the truth. And you took that and now you can go and you can create that legacy and on and on and on and on and on for everybody. So I know that was kind of a long-winded way to get around to maybe not answering your question. I'm not sure, but I got off on a tangent. I get a little excited, Kurt.
No, it's great.
So, but yeah.
No, I think that's really helpful. And,
That's who we
this
are.
has been really informative and inspiring. And I hope many, obviously elders quorums, but also just any man in the church, can consider this as a resource. And so where would you send them if they want to learn more about F3 and find a group near them?
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest way is to go to the website, right? www.f3nation.com and find a location near you, right? We do a pretty good job. The local regions do a pretty good job of keeping that up to date. So generally speaking, we kind of rely on that information as being pretty good and pretty dialed in. So that's probably the easiest way. There's also, I think I can't remember if it's an app or a website, but there's something called F3 Near Me. I think it's f3near.me. And you can plug in your zip code and it'll find the ones that are right where you are, right? Or actually it might even just know your location and pull them up for you. And so that's probably the easiest way. The coolest part is you don't have to pay anything. There's no registration desk. You literally just walk up and be like, hey, is this F3? And they go, yeah. And then you go, cool. And then you run, like, or do whatever you're gonna do, right? That's it. That's the whole of it. Now they may get your email address or something after the fact because they want to, help you stay connected or whatever. But it really is as simple as that. And then when someone says, who EH'd you, they'll ask that, right? Who was the guy that invited you out? Who emotionally headlocked you? You can just dark helmet. And you heard it on a podcast, right? And then they'll give you some idiot nickname, and you'll be one of us.
That's awesome. And my mind just goes to like just what a powerful resources that is, because I know there's so many like leaders out there that are praying over certain men in the ward, or people who are struggling. We often default to this. Well, I need to make sure they get good, effective counseling and therapy, and of course, there's good in that, and sure, consider those things. But we often think that's like, if this person does not have an advanced degree in some psychology of some type, that that's the only thing that will help. When in reality, you'll be amazed how, especially in the context of men, how they find the solutions to their old problems when they have this community, this fellowship, this connection with God, with this masculine experience. And so this could be one of many things to say, hey, yeah, I'm glad you're doing therapy, but did you go to F3 this week? Like, you should probably go to F3 this week, because that seems to always help you when you go, right?
Right. I mean, wives tell us all the time, oh, when he starts getting grumpy, I ask him, how many times did you go out this week? And then I kick him out, right? We get it. It happens all the time because you're exactly right. There, tons of research, right? Oh, physical exercise, sure. Right. And fellowship, sure. And, we see these articles all the time about, the great plague of male loneliness in our world. And And of course, none of them have any solutions for it. They just want to talk about it, but that's,
Yeah.
whatever. But I don't make any money if we solve the problem, right? Whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I'm here to tell you, man, you don't, it doesn't even have to be an F3 group. I don't care.
Yeah.
Don't care. Just get out there and start moving your body, because that is you, your primary, your spirit lives in there, right? And so if your body's not right and you're not doing things to take care of it and discipline that and treat that the way that it's supposed to be done, you're not going to get very far on the other stuff. You're just not. It's not, and it's not personal. So I don't get any. And that's the other thing about this, Kurt, that I love is I collect $0 in salary to do this. And I'm just telling you, like, it takes probably, I'd give it anywhere between 15 to 20 hours a week, easy, right? In the work that we're doing to kind of keep this organization moving, and meetings I have and different things like that, right? And I do it twice as much if I could, right? If I could figure out how to, because I don't care that that it doesn't make me any money. It makes me $0, and that also means that I'm going to tell you the truth no matter what. Whether you come or whether you don't come, I don't care. It doesn't make me anything, right? I don't benefit in any way other than knowing that the mission gets accomplished a little bit more in your life, right? That you get to be a better man. And I think that kind of that rising tide raises all boats, right? So if things get better in your community, and by golly, they're going to get better everywhere. And we got a world to prepare for Christ coming back, Kurt. We ain't got time to play around.